strength. Okay, Mataji, we're all set up.
Okay.
Like to begin?
Should I begin?
Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Nice to be back for a new chapter today. A very, very important chapter, the passing away of Bhishmadev in the presence of Krishna. So a little summing up of last chapter. So in the last chapter, we heard the beautiful, heart-rending prayers of Kunti Devi, in which she glorifies Krishna. And she glorifies his inconceivable potencies and also his endearing pastimes with Mother Yashoda and other residents of Vrindavan. And then she prays that her bodily connection with her family members be cut so that her devotion to Krishna is one-pointed and unwavering. Krishna is very pleased with her prayers and now is ready to leave for Dwarka. He's been in Hastinapur for many, many months, And we heard last time how he came when the Pandavas were in exile, and he was there for them through all their different calamities, and he was always there with them. So Kunti Devi was in separation from Krishna because of his involvement in her life and the lives of her sons. So as Krishna is on the chariot, not as a chariot driver, but as the the person, the passenger, and and with Daruka taking him to Dwarka, then Yudhishthir Maharaj comes running to him. He was actually right there, and he's feeling very despondent because he was blaming himself for the death of 640 million soldiers in the war of Kurukshetra. And he asked Krishna to stay for a few months. So Krishna agreed. And to rather than to help him with his despondency that he was so successfully did with Arjuna right before the war, when Arjuna didn't want to fight, and he was feeling very nervous that all his family members would die because of him. Then Krishna convinced him to fight. But here we see that Krishna was not able to convince Yudhishthira to give up his despondency. Instead, Krishna sent Yudhishthira Maharaj to Bhishmadev to get instructions from him. Even though there were many, many sages there who were totally capable to instruct him, as well as Krishna himself could have instructed him. So in this 9th chapter, we will begin to hear how Bhishmadev pacifies Yudhishthira Maharaj. That's our first slide. And no one knows the plan of Krishna, because that's how he's going to explain to Yudhishthira Maharaj that how Krishna nobody knows this is the plan of the Lord. So first Bhishmadev welcomes all of them, all of the sages who had assembled there to see him leave his body lying on a bed of arrows. So he welcomed them with sweet words, not being incapable to do anything physically. Then Bhishmadev worshipped the Lord by glorifying him in various ways. We'll hear that. And first of all, he glorifies the Pandavas, how they have suffered so much at the hands of Duryodhana. But all this was arranged by the inconceivable time factor of the Supreme Lord. So in text 15, I'm going to read the Sanskrit and read a few verses to get our auspicious start in this chapter. So here, Bhishmadev is speaking these beautiful verses. Yatra dharma suto raja gada panir rikodara krishnostri gandivam chapam suhit krishna sato vipat. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It is irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhishthira, the son of the demigod, controlling religion, Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. O king, no one knows the plan of the Lord, Shri Krishna. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. O best among the descendants of Bharat, Yudhishthira, I maintain, therefore, that all this is within the plan of the Lord. Accepting the inconceivable plan of the Lord, you must follow it. You are now the appointed administrative head, and my Lord, you should now take care of those subjects who are now rendered helpless. So, Bhishmadev here says that no one knows the plan of the Lord. So Prabhupada explains questions as to what is the plan of the Lord? What is the Lord's plan for all of us? What is the plan for specifically here? What is the plan of the Lord for Yudhishthira Maharaj? And he answers that by saying that, Bhishmadev answers that by saying that you should take care of the subjects. So you should not just inquire, but simply follow. You should become the king and rule your citizens. Bhishmadev says that the Lord teaches the world by teaching his pure devotees. For example, a mother-in-law teaches the daughter-in-law by teaching the daughter. So a devotee's duty is to encouragingly accept the tribulations as a favor and not see them. And he should not see any difference between the Lord giving tribulations and he giving difficulties, because he's absolute. Sometimes it may seem that the Lord is favoring someone and giving distress to another, but the devotee accepts it in the same mood. So whether the suffering or benediction is coming from him, both are absolute. We must ungrudgingly accept. We cannot discriminate. So Yudhishthira Maharaj should rule because he's a pure devotee and virtuous, and this is the Lord's desire. Under his rule, all the citizens have a better chance to go back to Godhead. The whole plan of this creation is to reclaim the fallen souls in the material world. So from verses 15 to 17 that we just read, Bhishmadev has concluded pacifying Yudhishthira Maharaj. And now from verses 18 to 24 in our next slide, Bhishmadev is going to glorify Krishna. And of course, glorification of Krishna has been going on throughout the entire first canto, and as well as goes on for the other cantos as well. Now, so here Bhishmadev glorifies Krishna, and he explains who really knows the Lord. So first he begins by saying that how Krishna is Sakshat Bhagavan, which means he's the original personality of Godhead. And then he explains very briefly about the expansions of the Lord, how Krishna, his first expansion is Balaram. And from Balaram comes the Chaturvyuha, which is the quadruple expansion, Anirudh, Pradyumna, Vasudev, and Shankarshan. And Shankarshan. And from Shankarshan comes all types of Narayan. So we know that there's different forms of Narayan who are the predominating deities in different Vaikuntha planets. But the source of all these Narayans is Krishna. And of course, from Narayan come the three Purushas. So all this is more elaborately explained in the third canto and also in the second canto. So Bhishmadev knows the tattva of the Lord. Then he says how Krishna explains, then he says how Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. Why? Because not only is he the Narayan, first Narayan, but he wanders in the forest of Vrindavan and he enjoys himself. And by doing that, he bewilders everyone. So here we see how Bhishmadev is the authority. So Prabhupada writes how we have to accept his authority. And he's establishing his supremacy as a Mahajan. So earlier, as you remember in the last slide we discussed, how Bhishmadev made the point that no one can understand the plan of the Lord. So if nobody can understand what is the plan of the Lord, then who can really understand him? And Bhishmadev here explains that actually we can understand Krishna only by following the Mahajans. And among all the 12 Mahajans, he gives the example of Kapila, Narada, and Shiva, and of course he himself. But he says in a very humble way how even though he's a Mahajan, he does not know Krishna completely. And then he explains who are those devotees whom Krishna really reveals himself to them. And of course, Krishna will reveal to his devotees only as much, depending on his relationship with them. So, and just like there's so many forms of Krishna because each soul is attracted to this particular form. And then Krishna correspondingly reciprocates with that devotee. So Prabhupada writes how, then he gives the example of many of the other Mahajans as well, Shankaracharya, Brahma. And Krishna Das, interestingly, how Krishna Das Kaviraj in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he explains the position of Krishna. Just in order for establishing the supremacy of the tattva of Lord Chaitanya, he goes into detail about first explaining about who Krishna is, why he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this way, he explains that Lord Chaitanya is no other than Krishna himself. And the same way we see in the 10th canto, in the 14th chapter, how Brahma also explains how Krishna, in the form of Krishna, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After he's seen, after he offers prayers of repentance to Krishna in the 14th chapter, he claims that Krishna, he tells Krishna, you're none other than Narayan. You're the source of Narayan. And of course, Krishna jokes with him and says, no, how can you say that? I'm just a little cowherd boy. In this way, there's many great souls who have established that Krishna is the original Narayan. So then Bhishmadev goes on to explain how, I'll quote a paragraph from the purport of verse 19, which kind of explains it really nicely, what Bhishmadev is going to say. And he says, so I'll read that. Prabhupada quotes Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of the great acharyas in the modern age, who explains that Anubhav, or the glory of the Lord, is first appreciated by the devotee in ecstasy, manifesting the symptoms of perspiring, trembling, weeping, bodily eruptions, etc., which are further enhanced by steady understanding of the glories of the Lord. Such different understandings of bhavas are exchanged between Yashoda and the Lord, binding the Lord with ropes, and in the chariot driving by the Lord in the exchange of love with Arjuna. These glories of the Lord are exhibited in his being subordinated before his devotees, and that is another feature of the glories of the Lord. So these are the people, these are the devotees whom Krishna really, reveals himself. These devotees who are in the mood of bhava, who have these symptoms, and even these symptoms go through different stages, where it's enhanced further and further according to the relationship of the Lord with the devotee. And Bhishmadev very humbly says how these are the people whom Krishna really shows himself, reveals himself. Why? Because Krishna takes great pleasure in his subordinate role with his devotees. As we see, as Prabhupada mentioned here, how Krishna subordinated himself in front of Mother Yashoda, as well as Arjuna, when he was, when he became the chariot driver of Arjuna. So all these devotees are in spontaneous, pure love of God. And even the Pandavas, we hear sections of the story of the Pandavas in Mahabharata, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Pandavas would go into these stages of bhava while they were interacting with Krishna. So their love for Krishna was on a very, very high platform, because the Lord interacted with him as in a bodily relationship, as a cousin. In fact, in one of the purpose, Prabhupada writes how, the relationship of Krishna with the Pandavas was was very, very on a very high platform, because there was not only the relationship of the soul between them, but also the relationship, there was a bodily relationship as well. And that became even sweeter, just like in the case of Yashoda and Krishna. She's the mother of Krishna, and Krishna is known as Yashoda Nandan. So that enhances the love of the devotee with the Lord. So now in the next slide, we're going to, Bhishmadev explains the question, answers the question as to why do if these devotees are so elevated and Krishna reciprocates with them, so how is it that they suffer? Why did the Pandavas suffer so much? And this is a question, this is the first thing that Bhishmadev addresses when he meets Yudhishthira, when Yudhishthira goes to see him when he's lying on the bed of arrows, is he's glorifying the sufferings of the Pandavas. And so why do they suffer? So that's a question that's answered by Prabhupada in the purport of text 19. Okay, why do devotees suffer? And so Prabhupada explains in that purport that the Lord purposely puts these devotees into difficulties. And this is another kind of love that's exchanged between the Lord and his devotee. And that's also a form of very deep, loving exchange between the devotee and the Lord. And we know that, in many, many stories in the Bhagavatam, how Krishna will take away everything from a devotee, his friends and relatives, many, many stories. And we see in the story of Parikshit Maharaj how he took away everything from him. And such a devotee becomes very helplessly dependent on Krishna. So that is the plan of Krishna. Just so he wants the devotee to experience so much love and so much bhava, it says, between him and Krishna. Right? So for a devotee suffering, like the Pandavas suffering, it's not karma, but it's the Lord's plan. So again, this is pretty much also continuation of that question, that confusion that Yudhishthira Maharaj has as to why all this had to happen. So many people lost their life. It's because the Lord is Lord's plan, and he wants to exchange this kind of relationship of love between himself and his devotee, and he wants to teach that. How else is the Lord going to teach these higher symptoms of exchange of love between the Lord and his devotee, except through situations like this? When he puts his devotees under great suffering, and he's able to show the world the reaction of the devotees to those sufferings. So these are very confidential matters, and that is very difficult on our conditional state to understand. But Prabhupada explains these so wonderfully in the purport of text 19. But these very same things become very bewildering for a non-devotee to understand. So, but a Mahajan or a pure devotee, he understands these things, and he's not disturbed by these tribulations that Krishna puts on his devotees. So the next slide, where Bhishmadev talks about how all this applies to us. In other words, how one can get to that platform of being so intimate with Krishna. So the answer to that is explained in verse 23, where Prabhupada explains that the process of gaining such intimacy with the Lord is through the process of bhakti, by chanting the names of Krishna and by remembering him at the end of one's life. So beautifully Prabhupada writes in the purport of verse 23. Such a yogi, devotee of the Lord, engages himself 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord, so that his whole attention is engrossed with the thoughts of the Lord in ninefold devotional service, namely hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, praying, becoming a voluntary servant, carrying out orders, establishing a friendly relationship, or offering all that one may possess in the service of the Lord. By such practice of yoga or linking up in the service of the Lord, one is recognized by the Lord himself. So this is the process, is by engaging oneself 24 hours a day and dovetailing one's activities for the pleasure of the Lord. And then we see that in the life of Bhishmadev. Even though he was involved in so many worldly duties, his remembrance of Krishna was very strong. So in the next slide, we will hear how Bhishmadev begs the Lord to come before him. Very sweet verse. That's verse 24, where Bhishmadev is praying to the Lord to please come in front of him as he's leaving his body. And Prabhupada writes how this is showing the humility of Bhishmadev, because he's asking the Lord to wait for that moment when he has the boon of deciding when he wants to leave. Why is he asking the Lord to wait? It's because he has things to do. He has to first enlighten Yudhishthira. And Bhishmadev, at this point, is asking Krishna to manifest his four-handed form as Lord Narayan. So Prabhupada writes how Bhishmadev was meant to go to Vaikuntha. There was no doubt about it. But in his humility, he's not feeling himself qualified. And therefore, he's praying to Krishna to please come before him. And this is a great lesson for all of us. How even such an exalted devotee is not feeling himself qualified. Prabhupada writes that a Vaishnava is not puffed up. He feels not qualified. Anyway, the devotee, he says, is not anxious to go back to Godhead. He's entirely dependent on Krishna's will. He just wants to serve Krishna, whether it's in hell or heaven. So Bhishmadev has such a mood. Now in our next slide, we're going to talk about why does Krishna asked Bhishmadev to instruct Yudhishthira. This is a very important point. There were so many sages sitting there. Krishna himself was there. But why Bhishmadev? Why Bhishmadev? After all, he was not even a father, a husband, a sage, or a philosopher. He was just a politician. But yet Krishna asked him to give these very meaningful instructions to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Prabhupada says how by any material standards, Bhishmadev should not have been questioned. He was lying on a bed of arrows. The only thing that he could do was talk, and everything else was tied down, right, by the arrows. So Prabhupada gives the example in the purport that how just like a father likes his son to be glorified, in the same way Krishna is the father of all living entities, and he likes it when his son shows qualities that deserve to be glorified. So Krishna is feeling more pleasure when Bhishmadev is glorified than when he himself is glorified. So Krishna says very emphatically that worship of the devotee is more glorified than worshipping the Lord. And we hear that in the Bhagavad Gita. And the Lord is more pleased. Just like the devotees are eager to glorify, so Krishna is also eager to glorify his devotee. This matter is this matter can be seen in many, many stories in the Bhagavatam, right? And also in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu glorifies all his devotees so frequently. Right? In the Mahaprakash Leela, he's glorifying one after another so many devotees. Then he glorifies the Goswamis. Then he spends a whole chapter on Sakshi Gopal, and then another chapter on Madhavendra Puri. So the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita is all about glorification of the Lord's devotees, because Krishna gets great pleasures. And in the same way, Krishna gives tribulations to them just so he could glorify them. So Bhishmadev's life was very, very exemplary. He went through a lot of struggles. He had to watch Duryodhana and his cohorts to how they were planning against Pandavas and trying to harm them in so many different ways. And there was nothing he could do to stop them. He tolerated all these things. And that made him very, very exalted. I was thinking of another story, actually, Chitraketu, a story of how Chitraketu, when he loses his son, then how there were many, when Chitraketu was cursed by Mother Parvati, then Prabhupada writes many purposes glorifying devotees, pure devotees who take the curses to be blessings given by the Lord himself. So in our next slide, we're going to talk about how Bhishmadev explains the different dharmas. Dharmas means duties. So he's going to explain how the different duties of different classes of men. So remember, Yudhishthira Maharaj had come to Bhishmadev for instructions. So after explaining to Bhishmadev, to Yudhishthira Maharaj, Bhishmadev, after explaining to Yudhishthira Maharaj, how not to be despondent, how all this was a plan of the Lord to put you on the throne because you Pandavas are so virtuous. Then he explains also, because now he's going to become king, so he explains the different duties of a king, as well as the different duties of different varnas and different ashramas. Now, what are these varnas? The varnas means the brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and shudras. This is the different social classes, and the ashramas are the brahmacharis, grahasthas, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. So in this way, Bhishmadev goes through an elaborate explanation of the different duties of these different classes of people. So brahmacharis, he explains how they are trained to see the world as temporary, which need and full of misery, and which leads to knowledge and detachment. Now, with this training, he can go either way. He can, if he's attached, he can go to the grahasth platform, or if he's detached, he can go straight to sannyas. So, but the whole purpose of these varnas and ashrams is to gradually advance. Then he explains about how the different duties of the different varnas, the kshatriyas, how they should give charity. They cannot teach, but they should know all the shastras. And for brahmanas, of course, there's no violence, and how they should teach, and preach. And for vaishyas, he explained how they should be cow protection. And for Shudras, he explained how they should help the other classes. In this way, he goes into quite a bit of elaborate explanation. Then he talks about Raj Dharma, which is the duties of a king, how the king should exhibit ideal character, and how they should be very strong with the dacoits. He should exact taxes, about 1/4 of the citizens' earning, but those taxes, he said, should be used to protect the citizens, not to take it for themselves, but it should be used for the welfare of the citizens. And because the king should protect them, and also mainly the king should also protect the devotees because they're giving ultimate knowledge. And interestingly, he also talks about moksha dharma, which is the process of attaining salvation. And it talks about things that must be given up. For example, I'll read a little section of the purport of Prabhupada, very nice purport. Prabhupada writes, as far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice, and bewilderment. To get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive. To be free from unlawful desires, one should not make any plans. By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance only, one can conquer desires and avarice. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. So in this way, he describes the process of salvation. He talks about three dharma, the dharma of the women, which he talks about the women, how they power of inspiration for men. So, and how women are very powerful, are more powerful than men, and such powerful women are controlled by shyness. When Krishna was departing to Hastinapur, Prabhupada writes how women in Hastinapur did not go in front of Krishna to see him, rather they went on the rooftops. Their shyness is their powerful weapon by which they are able to conquer and keep unscrupulous men away. So this is the Vedic culture. When that shyness is lost, that woman can create havoc in society, which is Varna Sankara. Then he talks about Bhagavad Dharma, which is superior to all the other dharmas. It is the topmost. It is the process of pleasing the Lord by loving devotional service. We are all eternal servants of the Lord, and we should serve him. So in the next slide, Bhishmadev is actually the sweetest part of this chapter. It's the Bhishmadev's final moments, how he remembers the different forms of Krishna on the battlefield. So Bhishmadev is on the Virya Rasa with Krishna. In other words, the form of the Lord, different forms of the Lord in different different forms in the battlefield. So I'll read a few verses here. So by now, Bhishmadev has taken his, he's taken his mind away from all external things, and he's completely meditating on Krishna. He's focusing on Krishna. And so he's giving up all his external, thoughts and meditation and his, remembrances, dealing with the people, but he's focusing himself on Krishna. So starting text 32, I'll read a couple verses and I'll kind of elaborate on that. Bhishmadev said, "Let me now invest my thinking, feeling, and willing, which was so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties, in the all-powerful Lord Shri Krishna. He's always self-satisfied, but sometimes, being the leader of the devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending to the material world, although from him only the material world is created." Shri Krishna, this is the text 33, Shri Krishna is the intimate friend of Arjuna. He has appeared on this earth in his transcendental body, which resembles the bluish color of tamal tree. His body attracts everyone in the three planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. May this glittering yellow dress and his lotus face, covered with paintings of sandalwood pulp, be the object of my attraction. And may I not desire fruitive results. So he's meditating, Krishna is meditating here on his beauty, his beautiful form. Now, descriptions of his beauty, Krishna's glorification of beauty is practically covers the entire Bhagavatam. And in Cantos 1, we will hear more of his beauty in chapters 10 and 11. Then it also comes in Canto 2 in his forms as the three Purushas, and we also hear in Canto 3. So the Lord's beauty is emphasized so much. Why? Because he's a person, and we are also persons. So Bhishmadev is desiring to see that form, which is dear to all devotees. And this form of Krishna, which he says is a collection of all beauty found everywhere. So Krishna is beautiful not only in his form, but he's also beautiful in his dealings with others, in his dealings with the devotees. So Prabhupada explains how Krishna is beautiful in his dealings with his devotees because he gives his devotees all credit. He gave his devotees all credit for winning the war. And also gave the credit to Bhishmadev. He gave credit to Arjuna. And we see in Chaitanya Leela how Lord Chaitanya gives credit to his followers. So in this way, Krishna is constantly giving credit to his devotees. So in this verse, Bhishmadev is emphasizing Krishna's friendship with Arjuna. So really, Bhishmadev's relationship with Krishna is tied in with Arjuna's, because Krishna is Arjuna's friend. So he's meditating on the form of Krishna in the battlefield, not as a friend. He's not meditating on him as a king of Dwarka, but he's meditating on the form of Krishna in the battlefield. So text 34. On the battlefield where Lord Krishna attended Arjuna out of friendship, the flowing hair of Lord Krishna turned ashen due to the dust raised by the hoofs of the horses. And because of his labor, beads of sweat wetted his face. All these decorations, intensified by the wounds dealt by my sharp arrows, were enjoyed by him. Let my mind thus go to Sri Krishna. So again, here Bhishmadev is glorifying his sweetness and beauty, and his attachment to the form of Krishna as Parthasarathi. So we have to see that how Krishna will reciprocate to a devotee according to the attraction of that devotee to a particular form. And Krishna is so amazing that he can actually manifest in any form that he likes, just to satisfy the desires of his devotees. Any form that the devotee wants, Krishna will manifest himself. Now here we see that how he's meditating on the Lord in the form during the time when he's throwing arrows on the Lord. And these arrows, Prabhupada explains, were like the throwing of flowers during Abhishek. He's, of course, Bhishmadev is repenting on his action of throwing arrows against Krishna. Why? Because there's blood coming out from him. But of course, Krishna, he knows that Krishna is not in any pain. This is all an exchange of love. Krishna is thinking that, well, to the mundaners, let them think that there's blood coming out of my body. Let them think that I have a material body. But devotees know. So then Bhishmadev also, glorifies his merciful nature, Krishna's merciful nature. So how, even though he's been wounded by Bhishmadev's arrows, still Krishna is not leaving the chariot. He stays there. So to show his love and affection for Arjuna, that he's not going to abandon him, right? Even though he's being he's been attacked. Right? So all these things are exchanges of love between Bhishma and Krishna. And next one is a very nice verse, text 35. In obedience to the command of his friend, Lord Shri Krishna entered the arena of the battlefield of Kurukshetra between the soldiers of Arjuna and Duryodhan. And while there, he shortened the lifespans of the opposite party by his merciful glance. This was done simply by his looking at the enemy. Let my mind be fixed upon that Krishna. So Krishna's merciful nature again, where he shortened the lifespans, even though they were killed by Krishna and his devotees, but yet, and they died, but yet they got a wonderful ending because they actually got their Swarupa back. For these soldiers, it is said that they actually got to go to the spiritual world. When Krishna kills the demons, they go to the Brahma Jyoti. But all these soldiers were so fortunate, by just seeing Krishna on the battlefield, they gained their spiritual form. So why? In this verse, of course, Bhishmadev is thinking of the mercy, the meditating on the mercy and affection of Krishna towards his devotees. Okay, and in the next verse, I read that when Arjuna was seemingly polluted by ignorance upon observing the soldiers and commanders before him on the battlefield, the Lord eradicated his ignorance by delivering transcendental knowledge. May his lotus feet always remain the object of my attraction. So he's thinking of Krishna when he was speaking the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So all these forms that he's meditating are in relationship with Krishna on the battlefield. So here Prabhupada explains how the gopis, how the gopis, when they saw Krishna at Kurukshetra, after the war of Kurukshetra, then they did not like the form of Krishna as a king. They wanted to see Krishna in the ambience of Vrindavan. So different devotees are attracted to different forms of Krishna, and Krishnas reciprocate accordingly. Another point that Prabhupada says is a very nice point, that how Krishna will put his devotees in bewilderment in order to do something wonderful. Like he put Yudhishthira in bewilderment so that Bhishma could instruct him. He put Parikshit Maharaj in bewilderment so that Srimad Bhagavatam could be spoken. And he put Arjuna in bewilderment in order to speak Bhagavad Gita. So he puts his devotees in that state just so something wonderful can happen. So text 37, fulfilling my vow and sacrificing his own promise, he got down from the chariot, took up its wheel and ran towards me hurriedly. Just as a lion goes to kill an elephant, he even dropped his outer garment on the way. May he, Lord Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who awards salvation, be my ultimate destination. On the battlefield, he charged me as if angry because of the wounds dealt by my sharp arrows. His shield was scattered and his body was smeared with blood due to the wounds. Prabhupada writes that after the battle of Kurukshetra, during the battle of Kurukshetra, there was a lot of sporting spirit. So here the story of Mahabharata. In the story of Mahabharata, it's explained how Duryodhan, at a certain point, Duryodhan is blaming Bhishmadev and saying that you're biased. You're biased towards the Pandavas, so you're not going to kill them. So Bhishmadev gets really angry because he's a Kshatriya, and he gives a vow. He takes a vow that he gives special arrows to Duryodhan, special 5 arrows, and he tells him that tomorrow all the 5 Pandavas will be killed by these special arrows, and he gives it to the custody of Duryodhan and asks him to give him the next day. So of course, Krishna knows what's happening. And so he tells Arjuna, and Arjuna goes to Duryodhan and tricks him. He takes the arrows from him by trickery. So when Bhishmadev finds out, then he tells Krishna that you tricked me and you took the arrows. So now tomorrow you will have to break your vow. Because Krishna had taken the vow that he would not pick up arms in this battlefield. So he's saying that the fight will be so ferocious that you will have to break your vow. So in the end, we know that how Krishna did break his vow, and he charged Bhishmadev. When he saw his friend Arjuna in trouble, he charged Bhishmadev with his chariot, the wheel of the chariot, and used it like a Sudarshan disc to charge Bhishmadev. And of course, at that time, the battle ended. There was a conch shell blowing, and battle ended at that point. And so Bhishmadev meditates on this form of Krishna rushing towards him. Arjuna is trying to stop him, but he's not stopping. So this is the desire to satisfy. This is his desire. He wanted to satisfy Bhishma by helping him fulfill his vow. And at the same time, he wanted to protect Arjuna. And it's for that he breaks his own vow of not picking up arms. So this is the Lord's dealings with his devotees. So the text 39, at the moment of death, let my ultimate attraction be to Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. I concentrate my mind upon the chariot driver of Arjuna, who stood with a whip in his right hand and a bridle rope in his left, who was very careful to give protection to Arjuna's chariot by all means. So Bhishmadev here is concentrating on this form of Krishna, holding a whip in his right hand and a rope in his left hand. So Bhishmadev is coming very close to leaving his body and going back to Vaikuntha. And so he's praying to Krishna that he leaves with this memory of Krishna charging towards him, with the wheel, and as well as, with blood on his body from the wounds that he had inflicted. So Bhishmadev was to die at this moment, thinking of the Lord in this way, and he wants to actually die and take birth in another universe where Krishna is enacting this pastime, this Leela. There's many, many universes, and this Leela goes on eternally. And devotees like Bhishmadev, they are able to serve Krishna in this capacity again and again. So in text 40, Bhishmadev says, "Let my mind be fixed upon Lord Shri Krishna, whose motions and smiles of love attracted the damsels of Rajadham, the gopis. The damsels imitated the characteristic movements of the Lord after the disappearance from the rasa dance." So ultimately, Bhishmadev glorifies the most elevated devotees, and that's the gopis, who are the topmost devotees. Madhurya Ras, that's a rasa that the gopis are in, they are the highest. This rasa is the highest, and it contains all the other rasas in this rasa. So it's the highest. So among all the devotees of Madhurya Ras, Radharani, of course, is the topmost. So he's aspiring for the mercy of the gopis. And this is pleasing Krishna very much. How if a devotee glorifies another devotee, that really pleases Krishna. And it brings great mercy from him. So in text 42, he's ending very close to, "Now I can meditate with full concentration upon that one Lord, Shri Krishna, now present before me, because now I have transcended the misconceptions of duality in regard to his presence in everyone's heart, even in the hearts of mental speculators. He is in everyone's heart. The sun may be perceived differently, but the sun is one." So this is his last prayer. And what is his realization? That absolute truth is one, but he can manifest in many forms. But they're all same features. They're all features of the same truth, Krishna. So in other words, Krishna can take many, many forms, but it's still the same Krishna. And after this, we will hear about what happens after Bhishmadev passes away. When he became silent, his breathing stopped. And Prabhupada makes a point to explain how, since it's said that how he became one with Krishna or merged himself in Krishna, he did not become, this is not impersonalism. This is not that Krishna and him became one. One should not think like that. Rather, he took complete shelter of the Lord and, in his remembrance of the Lord. So, text 44, knowing that Bhishmadev had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute, all present there became silent like birds at the end of the day. Thereafter, both men and demigods sounded drums in honor, and the honest royal order commenced demonstrations of honor and respect, and from the sky fell showers of flowers. O descendants of Bhrigu, Shaunaka, after performing funeral rituals for the dead body of Bhishmadev, Maharaj Yudhishthira was momentarily overtaken with grief. All the great sages then glorified Shri Krishna, who was present there by his confidential hymns. Then all of them returned to their respective hermitages, bearing always Lord Krishna within their hearts. So, after this, the great religious king Maharaj Yudhishthira executed the royal power in the kingdom strictly according to the codes of royal principles approved by his uncle and confirmed by Lord Shri Krishna. So this is where we end in text 49. So thank you very much for allowing me to explain this chapter. And now we'll give it over to Shri Radhika Mataji, who will explain all the wonderful activities that are for the children in a guidebook, Srimad Bhagavatam guidebook. Very, very nice activities. Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji. Just a few minutes while I get my technology started. Haribol, welcome back. Hopefully we've read the purpose in advance of our discussion with the youth that we are trying to engage. And then we have our discussion directly reading from the translations themselves, going through turn by turn and reading translations. And then we are ready to dive into activities for young readers. So chapter 9 begins, as usual, with a story summary. Bhishmadev passing away. How would you feel if you had to do something really difficult for a higher good? The Pandavas had to kill many of their friends and relatives in battle just to protect the innocent people from evil rulers. It really wasn't easy for them because they loved their friends and relatives very much. So the story goes on like this with some nice illustrations. And I really like the conversational format. You can see on the second page, "Oh, my boys," spoke grandfather Bhishmadev with great affection. "Many bad things have happened to you and your mother Kunti just because you tried to please Krishna. You could have died several times, but Krishna and the devotees always protected you. You must remember that everything is Krishna's plan, so don't worry. Accept the plan of the Lord and follow it." So I really like how the verses are tied together in one smooth conversation in these story summaries. And then we have key messages. So the 45 verses of the chapter are grouped together with themes and messages that are spread out throughout this chapter. And the book encourages a child to put these themes in their own words, memorize them, look them up in the Srimad Bhagavatam, discuss each theme and apply their life. Not every chapter has character descriptions, but this one does. And it's a nice way to discuss Bhishmadev. So, in my Sunday school, we went around and so what do you know about Bhishmadev? And everybody shares what they know. And then we go through and see if we missed anything. He's one of the 12 Mahajans. He's the son of King Shantanu and Ganga Devi, a disciple of Brihaspati, known as Devavrata as a youth. Bhishma means he who took a terrible vow. So the book encourages the child to share what he or she knows with a partner. The descriptions below. There are 8 multiple choice questions given to understand the story. And this is a really fun way to understand the storyline. And then the higher thinking questions, which for older youth can be provided in written format. So encouraging them to write and then checking for the punctuation and grammar and spelling and teaching all of that through chapter 9 of Canto 1. And for perhaps younger, this is more a matter of discussion. Some very thoughtful questions. Explain the phrase higher or greater good. Refer to the part of the story summary describing how the Pandavas had to kill their family members and friends in order to protect innocent people from evil rulers. So this is a really thoughtful way to get them thinking about, can we make those determinations of, doing something that would ordinarily or moralistically be considered wrong for a higher good? And then how did Lord Krishna fulfill the desire of Bhishma while sacrificing his promise not to take up any weapons? And if Bhishma was such a great devotee, why did he join the opposite side? And summarizing Bhishmadev's meditations. So some very thoughtful questions here. And this is a real fun Back to Krishna board game. So there are 2 resources provided, one that has the board game itself, and then the other one that has some questions, true and false questions that are based on this chapter. And here is the resource 1 that has the board. And so what children do is they take pegs from another game like Ludo or Monopoly, or, so they'll have their pegs at the start, and then they roll a die and they move forward as many spaces as the number on the dice. So if it's And if it's two, they land on the question, and then they have to pick up a question from the pile of questions, answer the questions are very nice questions, true or false. Yudhishthira asked Bhishmadev to explain how to win more battles. And so if you get it right, then you move forward 3 spaces on the board. And if you get it wrong, you move back. And then there are also some other spaces that, have these back arrows. Move back 1 space, move forward 2 spaces. And I think for the smiley face, if you land on a smiley face, means you take another turn. So this was a really, really fun exercise. And we did it in Vaishnava Academy, our homeschool co-op, where the children had these legs and then they had their cards and they're taking their pawn back to Krishna. It's such really rewarding. Oh, I reached Krishna, went back to Goloka, and have some videos of them. Oops, just share my sound.
What's your question?
I'm Laura. Yeah.
And everybody can help him too. What's your question?
Laura, because I know 5-year-old 4. Vidura. Is that warm? Bhishmadev's nephew. Vidura's.
Vidura was Bhishma's nephew. Is that correct?
No. The Pandavas were Bhishma's nephew. Oh yeah. Vidura. No. Bhishma's. No. The Pandavas were Bhishma's grandsons. Yeah, grandsons. Yeah. His nephew was Vidura and his. Wait, what? Yeah, nephew was Vidura and Bhishma. Yeah, Bhishma. His Pandavas were his grandsons and Vidura was his nephew. Okay.
There had a lot of confusion going on there about this question about who was the nephew and who was the grandson.
2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, here. You're here. No, you're here. He got 6. Yeah. I'm here. Yeah, and then you go 2 forward, 1, 2, but then you go 3 back, so you're over here.
Uh-oh.
With Gora. Wait, what about Kashani?
She's coming. Go ahead. You can keep playing.
But then she's second. No.
Okay. So that was a real fun activity in the chapter. And here's an analogy activity to bring out the scholar in you. So I really like how the book cashes in on analogies and metaphors, because they are just they're an easy way to understand the philosophical concepts that are presented, and really helps the child to develop those critical thinking skills, later on in life when you're answering those SAT questions or ACT questions. Those analogies that you've read from the Srimad Bhagavatam really help you, because if this is to this, then, what is the relation of this to that? So the book, especially I was appreciating, because currently I'm reading 3rd Canto, and there are a lot of analogies that Prabhupada has given in purports in 3rd Canto, because they're pretty difficult concepts to understand in Sankhya philosophy. And I liked how the guide for young readers goes into every analogy, and there'll be an activity for each of those analogies so we can understand them very clearly. So coming back to this chapter, the order of the devotee. So in the purport of the 35th verse, there's an analogy given. The Lord, being the supreme living being, is never the order supplier or order carrier of anyone, whoever he may be. But out of his causeless mercy and affection for his pure devotees, sometimes he carries out the order of the devotee like an awaiting servant. By executing the order for devotee, the Lord becomes pleased, as the father is pleased to carry out the order of a small child. So a couple points here, a servant and like a father. This is possible only out of pure transcendental love between the Lord and his devotees, and Bhishmadev was quite aware of this fact. So there are several nice ways to understand this analogy that are provided in this chapter. Each time you think you know the answer to the questions being asked, there are different scenarios provided. Ring a bell as fast as possible. And the first one to ring the bell can try to answer the questions. So for instance, Arjuna's charioteer, it asks you a few questions about that. The Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between 2 people. Who are they? And before going to battle, Arjuna wanted on his side Krishna's army or Krishna's weapon. To direct Krishna in the right direction, did Arjuna communicate, this way or that way? I'm sorry, I should have read the first part. Basically, there's some quiz cards that are given, and you're supposed to prepare these quiz cards and some pastimes that one might want to discuss. So, and then at the end, it also gives some conclusions to discuss. There are many examples of the Lord reciprocating with the sincere devotees. And there are so many examples of this, but a few are provided in this particular activity. There's also a quiz. So look at the questions below, and you can add even more questions of your own, and then read them out to a partner, or do this in teams and collaborate with the answers. Here, the resource at the end of the chapter provides some picture clues. And this is a very nice way for the children to remember the instructions of Bhishmadev. These are the instructions, the 9 qualities a human being must acquire to be called a civilized person. And then the children have to write what the instruction is. And depending on the age or the ability of the child, this could be a very or more complicated. Matching the names of Krishna, because lying on the deathbed, Bhishmadev remembered different names of Krishna that indicate his relationship with his devotees. Partha Sarthi, so Purushottama, Bhaktavatsala. And then this activity gives these names, and you have to match it to the appropriate meaning. So a very fun way to learn the meaning of these Sanskrit names that refer to Krishna. Instructions of devotees is an introspective activity provided. The instructions of senior devotees are invested with potency that can help to transform our hearts. So create a mind map of some key instructions that you have received, and you can add how you've applied and what the effect has been. And then resource 4 gives one example. So instructions of advanced devotees, you can make a bubble like that. And one instruction that this person might have received is, the instruction was to hear regularly about Krishna. And I put it into practice by listening to lectures, hearing myself read aloud, discussing a verse with a friend. And what was the effect? Increase in knowledge. I increased my enthusiasm, developed a relationship with the speaker by hearing them. So that's an example of a mind map given, and the child can draw their own mind map. A nice writing activity to write the biography of Bhishmadev. And it explains what a biography is. It's a written account of the series of events that make up a person's life. So first, research Bhishmadev's life in detail, and some prompts are given to guide the research. And then either just writing a paragraph or 2, depending on the age of the child, or this could be a bigger project where they create a cover and add illustrations and write, like a mini book. Acrostic poem is a really fun activity where Bhishmadev is spelled out, and then for each letter, come up with an adjective or a word that describes Bhishmadev. And encouragement to use the character description of Bhishmadev at the beginning of the chapter for inspiration. And keywords to go into a dictionary and look up the meanings of these words, and perhaps even make sentences with these words if you want to take it further. And extended vocabulary. So again, encouraging children to learn vocabulary and meanings of words. So matching the word with its meaning. Nice word search that makes it real fun to go through this chapter, and a poem at the end. The passing away of Bhishmadev. Bhishmadev is lying on a sharp arrow bed. He's not even crying, and he does not feel sad. Soon he will leave his body with Krishna by his side. Then he'll go back home to Godhead in the spiritual sky. He was the mighty son of the great king Shantanu. His mother was the Ganges, and brothers he had 1 and 2. The sage Vyasa and the brave king Vichitravirya, who had 3 sons, Dhritarashtra, Pandu, and Vidura. Dhritarashtra had 100 sons and Pandu 5 Pandavas. Bhishma taught them all how to fight and rule as honest Kshatriyas. The Kauravas never listened to Bhishmadev's advice. So during the battle of Kurukshetra, the Kauravas paid the price. The sons of Pandu always did just as Bhishma said. They loved him very much and came to see him on his arrow bed. They asked him many questions and he gave them good advice on how to always love Krishna all throughout their life. Bhishmadev is lying on a sharp arrow bed. His soul is eternal, that's why we're not sad. He has left his body with Krishna by his side. So there's the sadness of the passing of Bhishma, and there's the joy of the glory of his great life and the glory of his passing. And I feel it's very beautifully captured in this nice answers given at the end, and just shorter here because a lot of these answers don't have a A or B or a right and wrong. They're more thoughtful questions or thought-provoking things that could have many potential answers. And the books are available via Amazon in the US or UK or from Golden Age Media. Yeah, and the So that is chapter 9 for you. So we'll move on to our last section, which is questions. Please feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom tool. And those on YouTube, I provided the link twice. If you would like to join us via Zoom, you can ask your questions directly. So please raise your hand and I'll call on you to ask your questions. You can unmute yourself and perhaps turn on your video. Okay, we have somebody who's raised their hand. Amisha Mahadevan Mataji. Yourself.
Hi, Krishna Mataji.
Hi, Krishna.
I had 2 questions. One for you, Mataji Radhika Devi, dasi. The game that you showed where the kids were playing, can you hear me?
It's a little low. Last time I remember you were using your kids.
I had the headset. I should get in. Let me bring it closer. If it doesn't work, I will leave and come back with the headset and someone else can ask their question.
This is good.
Okay, sorry, Mataji. The game you showed, I'm having kids, we're in chapter 6 right now, but eventually when we get to this chapter, we're doing Sunday school through Zoom, my 12 to 14-year-olds. So would you suggest, it looked like they were all playing with their own tokens, but together? And in the Zoom format, do you have a suggestion on how to play? Should they each play on their own if they're home? Some of us are sometimes meeting at the temple, a few kids, and the rest are on Zoom. Or do we do one board game and everyone participates with cards individually and one token?
So, I can think of a couple ways. One is that whenever you have small group meetings, that you actually print it out on cardstock and play in person. But then, on Zoom, I could think of just sharing my screen and using the annotate feature to have the children move the pawn forward. It would require some level of proficiency on the part of the children to be able to move their pawn forward, using annotate. Because there's also, I do online games with kids nowadays, and there's these online dice roll. You can have a dice that rolls online. The kid just has to click on it and the dice says 6 or it says 1. So there are ways to make it work online by using that online dice roll on the annotate. But it'll be more complicated.
Okay. Okay. I'll think about it. And we'll come up with something.
Yeah, because I use Flippity. I use flippity.net to do these kind of games where the true and false questions that are provided in the book, on flippity.net, you can create a Google sheet that has you. So you'll have to type out all the questions that Mataji has given in the book, and then flip. When the child lands on a question and it's time for them to pick a card and answer it true or false, Flippity would send them a clue, and they would be able to like flip a card and say, oh, true or false. Bhishmadev's nephew was Vidura, but it just requires, a lot of effort on your part too. It's easier if you just print it on cardstock and do it in person.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then Aruddha Mataji, I had a question for you. In text 44 in the purport, and forgive me for my ignorance on this subject, but it talks about how, Bhishmadev went to Vaikuntha planets, but it says that there the unconditioned living beings enjoy life. I think they can render loving service to the Lord in the capacity of servant, friend, parent, and fiance. And I thought that only happened in Golika with Krishna, but it actually happens in the Vaikuntha planets too, that you can have these relationships, these rasas. Because Vaikuntha, in the third canto, chapter 15, Vaikuntha does talk about, residents having a relationship as husbands and wives, so that is there, that people over there also have their families, except these families are all devoted to Krishna. So, and in terms of being Krishna's fiance, is that what you're saying, right? Over here, as being Krishna's fiance. So, that is quite possible, because Krishna has, different devotees there in different moods. So I don't know much about that really, in what capacity they are, because Madhurya Ras is of two types. One is the relationship that Krishna has with with his queens, and then the other relationship is as a lover. Right? Mm-hmm. So as a lover is really primarily found in Golok Vrindavan, as among the gopis and among Radharani, right? That relationship is found, and as well as in Dwarka, we have the relationship of the queen with Krishna. But in Vaikuntha, there's a relationship. There's no Madhurya Ras really in that sense, in the sense of Vrindavan. There's no. So they say that there's the rasa of master servant, and then also Sakhya, but half of Sakhya. In other words, Arjuna is in the Vaikuntha mood, but he's Krishna's friend, but he's not at the capacity of jumping on the shoulders of Krishna like the cowherd boys. Okay, so there's only half of the Sakhya rasa, so it doesn't even go into Madhurya, because is only found in Vrindavan. So I have to read that section that you are talking about. So where it is. Yeah, it was text 44, and it's in the 44. Yeah, first paragraph, like 3/4 of the way down, where it's talking about Jnani, the Bhakta yogis, and then in these spiritual plans, Supreme Lord as Narayan predominates. Okay, well, yeah. So yeah, my confusion was I thought in Vaikuntha there's Lord Narayan, but I thought it was more awe and reverence relationship. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, in these spiritual planets, the Lord as Narayan and the healthy unconditional living beings live there by rendering loving service to the Lord in the capacity of send, friend, parents, and fiance. Yeah, so there is a relationship. I mean, the goddesses of fortune are there. They are serving the Lord in Vaikuntha. So there is relationship between, the goddesses of fortune with Krishna. So in that sense, there is, the Aishwarya type of relationship between Krishna and his female associates, Yeah. So I don't know. I really don't know about the fiance part. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just in general, not even specifically fiance. I just wasn't aware that there were these yes, in
yeah.
the
Yeah, there is, because there's goddesses of fortune that are serving him. Yeah.
Okay.
They are goddesses of fortune. So they're serving Krishna by the millions, and this is what Brahmaji, saw in his vision when Krishna allowed him to see that how these goddesses of fortune are serving Krishna constantly,
Okay.
So there is relationship with Krishna on this platform.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your questions. Any other questions, devotees?
Hare Krishna, Mataji, can I ask question?
Paglata Sakhi Mataji from Atlanta. How can we do without your questions?
Oh, Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Aruddha Mataji and Radhika Mataji for wonderful session. I just had this question, Mataji, because when I was teaching Garima this chapter, she had a hard time understanding, even though I tried my best to explain her, but she still have confusion that why Bhishmadev was on other side. Another thing, how can he be on the bed of arrows, but he still could not feel the pain? So I told her the whole past story where 101 lifetime before he had the bush and snake thing, but somehow she could not relate the whole thing. So if you can help me to explain her.
Yes, why he was on the, well, this was part of the Leela, that was meant to unfold. Why Bhishmadev was on the other side is because he was a man of his word, and he had taken a vow to defend the Kuru, throne. So he was bound by his vow to protect whoever is ruling the kingdom, and it happened to be the Kauravas. And so he was bound by his vow. However, his heart, he was such a devotee. He was such a devotee at heart, because even though he was on the wrong side, but yet he was always in remembrance of Krishna. And that's why towards the end of his life, we can see how he was in constant meditation of Krishna. And Prabhupada writes how throughout his life, as he was doing his duty as a member of the Kaurav dynasty, he was constantly in remembrance of Krishna. So that never took away. It was just he was bound, and he was, of course, he suffered because of that. He was on the wrong side, and he had to see the miseries, the sufferings of Pandavas, and had to tolerate all that. And it gave him a great deal of pain. So there's many different lessons that is learned from this. On a material level, we see how he kept his vow, his material dharma intact, of protecting his loyalty towards the dynasty. But we see how above and beyond that was his chastity to Krishna. His Sanatan dharma was above that, was higher than what his material dharma was. Unlike Dhritarashtra, his position was very unfortunate because he could not go beyond that. Whereas Bhishmadev was definitely on a very high platform. Yeah. Anything, Radhika, you want to add?
No answer.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mataji.
And I think the other part of your question, did it get answered about, how come he was in a bed of arrows and not feeling pain?
Oh, yeah. Well, because he was a pure devotee, and he had gotten that boon that he would die at will, And for him, Krishna just took the pain away, because it was something that a pure devotee, experienced. Even though he experiences pain, but his absorption in Krishna was very intense, that the devotee actually doesn't feel the pain. One time Prabhupada gave the example of Stalin, one of those rulers of Russia, and he was very, very, ruthless, very ruthless leader who had blood on his hands. He was responsible for the killing of many, many millions of his people. And he once said that how one time he had a surgery for appendicitis, And he told the doctor that he didn't want any anesthesia. And he had the whole surgery done without anesthesia. Why? How did he do that? Because his absorption in the affairs of his country was so intense that he didn't feel the pain. You see? So this is the devotee's attitude, is that he's feeling so much intensity in his absorption of Krishna that he's beyond his body. He actually doesn't feel the pain. I mean, we are talking about the caliber of Bhishmadev is very, very advanced. He's a very, he's in Virya Ras, and he's a very intimate devotee of the Lord who came to this world to give us lessons. Krishna used him to teach us many, many lessons through him, in terms of fulfilling, our material responsibilities, as well as our, how to dovetail our activities to please Krishna. And this is exactly what he did. Even though he was so much involved in worldly duties, but yet how it didn't waver his focus on Krishna. Yeah.
Mataji, he is wonderful devotee, but at one or two places I read in Bhagavatam, or maybe highly possible I misunderstood, but when she asked a couple questions about Bhishmadev, I was telling her that he took the side, like when Draupadi was being disrobed, even though he was adult, like elder of the family, but he didn't speak anything. So is it okay to explain them in that way also, that
Yeah, because he took the wrong side. He had to go through some, sufferings, because of the pain of seeing his devotees, his grandsons in so much suffering. I mean, that really, really pained him. So he did suffer, as a result of that. However, there's a deeper inner meaning. There's an external reason and there's an internal reason. In other words, there's things deeper beyond that, which is explained more in the Bhagavatam rather than the Mahabharata, where it's explained that how Bhishmadev was bound by his material, boundaries, but yet he was on a higher platform than Dhritarashtra and Dronacharya. They were on a platform where they were more, they made some serious mistakes, and their loyalty to Krishna was not as intense as Bhishmadev. So that distinction you must explain to them. Even from the beginning, it has to be explained, so that they get a chance to see Bhishmadev in that light, not as an ordinary conditioned soul, or even on the platform of others, like Dhritarashtra or Dronacharya, but rather to see him on a very, very beyond that, on a higher platform. The Lord, And you can get more information, from the Mahabharata in terms of relating the story, how things unfolded, but definitely from the Bhagavatam. And we hear that later as well, as we, in the Bhagavatam, we hear about, towards the end of 10th canto, we hear the inner, who Dhritarashtra really was, that actually Krishna used him to be who he was, just so he could unfold this whole war of Mahabharata, and that is revealed in his response to Akrura, who goes to visit him, because Krishna sends Akrura to see how Dhritarashtra and all the other parties were doing, and Akrura visits him, and Akrura preaches to him, and Dhritarashtra accepts all that, and he gives his helplessness, his weakness of flesh, his attachment to his son, but actually is revealed that he was actually a very great devotee of the Lord. So there's two sides to it. We see this misbehavior by him, where he succumbs to the attachment to his, totally unreasonable attachment to his son, where as a king, he could not see anything beyond that, his duties as a king, to uphold religious principles. But at the same time, we see the inner aspect, the inner reason, the inner meaning of these great personalities, the inner stories of these great personalities, and who they actually really are. And of course, Bhishmadev comes on even a higher platform. than even Dhritarashtra.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for clarifying.
We have a nice appreciation from Prema Rasa Prabhu and Ratikeli Radhika Mataji. They say they received the books this week and they're fantastic. Thank you so much. It's great to be able to follow along as you explain. And of course, Aruddha Mataji also made her PowerPoints available to all of us, and all of them, including today's chapter 9, are in that Google Drive link that I've shared with you. All right, our next question is from Kalandi Sundari Mataji from Columbus. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. Mata, my question is that I'm doing now this chapter, what is the Bhishmadev passing away, what you explained. So I have two kids, as one 7 and one is 4, and both I'm giving the same time because both sitting in the class and a small one also hearing. So is it okay, Mata? I try to explain as much as I can with both, and both sitting in and hearing. So I have to go again. I try, but I cannot make it like separately give more to the small one.
Yeah, this is okay. This is okay to have both of them together. And I know that Sri Radhika Mataji also does the same thing. Even when your younger one, Radhika, was a lot younger, even then you taught them together, and there were different techniques you used to teach them, right? So how to put them to
Yena tena prakarina, somehow or other, get the little one too. And in here, I used to have popcorn, a basket full of popcorn, and as long as he's got something going in his mouth, his eyes are open and his ears are open, or Play-Doh, or building blocks, or coloring. So, but I always did keep them together, and you'll find as you do that, as they get older, the younger one is really at a much higher level, and the older one doesn't feel so great about it at some point.
And Mataji, my big one asked the question that I tried to explain, but if you know better, Mata, so like why Bhishmadev choose Krishna to see as forehand Narayan, why he get, I told him that why he is attached with that form of Krishna, therefore he went to see that. So why Bhishma, he tell why Bhishmadev don't want to go Golok Vrindavan, why he choose Vaikuntha, it's actually. So what is the?
That's the form of, that's his Ishtadev. In other words, Bhishma, he's attracted to that form. So all the people who are in Vaikuntha Dham, they are attracted to the form of Krishna in that form, four-handed form. So, and they are satisfied, even though he's glorifying the gopis, and as being the topmost. And we see that in the prayers of Kunti Devi as well, and many other prayers of great stalwarts. So that's a relationship that comes from us, from our deep down, from our Sarupa. It's already there. It cannot be changed. Our attraction is already established. And Krishna is attractive no matter which form he's in. So perfectly okay for a person to be attracted to this form. But devotional service is a science. And so we have different stages. Like I was just saying in class, even the stage of bhava, which is at a very high platform, there's so many stages within that platform. So in the same way, overall, we understand. And even devotees like Bhishmadev understood, even though he begged the Lord to come in his Narayan form, but yet he knows that the gopis' love for Krishna is par excellence, So he has knowledge of that, but that doesn't bother him. In other words, his attraction is already established. He knows he's not aspiring to come in Madhurya Ras. He's not aspiring for that. But his love for Krishna is very, very, intense. So.
And Mata, just so I want to show the picture what he made for Bhishmadev, the big one, the painting he did. You can see that.
Very nice. Yeah, Radhika, this is nice, huh?
Very nice. If you would send me a picture, I'd love to add it to my collection. Thank you for your nice question and sharing. Our last question is going to be from Prema Ras Prabhu and Ratikeli Radhika Mataji. Please ask.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams. My question is connected to what Aruddha Mataji just answered in response to Champakalata Mataji's question about Dhritarashtra being a pure devotee and that he was acting out Krishna's will in the way he behaved with the Pandavas. Maybe this was already explained and I missed it, but could you please clarify, Mataji? This is something new to me.
Oh, that's in the one of the latest chapters in the 10th canto. And you can read that whole chapter where Prabhupada explains that so nicely in his book. Well, this is not, the translations are not done by Prabhupada, in that section.
Okay.
I mean, but still the acharyas explain and the purports are given by his disciples, explaining this fact that Dhritarashtra was actually, because it can be actually observed in his conversation with Akrura, he's actually, he's appreciating, unlike Duryodhana, when Krishna is being glorified, he's very envious and he doesn't accept it. He doesn't accept that glorification. But Dhritarashtra is actually accepting and he's glorifying the Lord in his response to Akrura. So if you can kindly read that chapter, I forget, it could be, I don't know, I forget that the chapter, but I can send it to you or something, where you can actually read that conversation, the dialogue between Akrura and Bhishmadev. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Not Bhishmadev, Akrura and Dhritarashtra.
Akrura and Dhritarashtra, yes. Thank you, Mataji.
So we start seeing these things in a more deeper way, and this, it's actually okay. It's very nice to give these children these two levels, one to see it on a external way. This is how it is. Just about every story, many stories in Bhagavatam are that always we are trying to balance between these two ways to look at things. Like in the story of Jai and Vijay, Jai and Vijay did an offense by stopping the sages from coming in, so they got a reaction for that. But the Lord wanted to use the Jai and Vijay, made them make this mistake so he could they could be cursed, so he could fight with them. Two different scenarios here, One way is to see how they were cursed, they made an offense. The other way that Krishna, made them make a mistake. So they could come to the mature world and he could fight with them, So because he had a desire to fight. So you have to tell these things to the children and let them understand these things, on both levels.
Thank you so much, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji.
This way they learn to go deeper into the story, and this enhances them, not only it enhances the spiritual understanding, deep understanding, but also gives them material tools of of deep thinking, critical thinking, analysis, and also abstract thinking. These come in very handy in life.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mataji.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, both of you. You've been very consistently joining every week. It's presence of devotees like yourself that inspires us to continue this week after week. I have a nice appreciation here from Vidya Mataji. She got the book set. She thinks it's amazing. And thank you for this wonderful service, she says. All right, Mataji, we're at the end of our time. Any closing comments?
Yes, I just wanted to, share something that I just remembered, that if anyone wants to now expand this and teach and start a little group of sharing, teaching, any one parent wants to teach other children, and make a group and start teaching them, then I'm willing to help them. I'm already doing some training sessions with teachers, with parents who are actually teachers in their Sunday school, and so one can join those sessions. I'm doing it like every other week, and where I try to explain to them how to teach Bhagavatam to their children, and we're going chapter by chapter. So and we go through many of those challenges that come. Okay, so just wanted to share that.
And if somebody wanted to get information about those sessions, would you like them to reach out to the Vaishnava Academy email and I can forward the query to you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So VA, V for Vaishnav, A for ISKCON @gmail.com. If you would write, if you're interested in these sessions, you can write in and I can forward the information from Mataji to you. Thank you, everyone. We will continue with chapter 10 next Saturday morning or evening, wherever you're at, but same time next Saturday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.